kind of want to create, let's see here, I was creating this yesterday or last night. I don't know if this will RAM preview. Do I have caching on? Volume cache is set to volume cache is set to off, of course, and our physics, I believe, are set to freeze. Okay. So creating basically this setup, which is a loop-de-loop, created a null with a light parented to it, and I'm swinging it around using that light as our emitter, and our particles aren't really doing anything. So I took that and pasted that into here and created this. Let's RAM preview this. So it's the same setup, except I did physics on the spheres and connected them with a noise. Oh, clicking on things restarts your RAM preview. I didn't mean to do that. And then we're creating a volume from that. So our null is kind of like here, and we're let's see, our stream resolution isn't compatible. Hello, so let's see here. It says unsupported resolution. You need to change the video resolution. Your current resolution is 1152/648, which is not supported. The expected video resolution is 1280/720. I don't know how to fix that. Well, leave that be for now. See what happens. See how bad this goes. All right, so we're previewing this. Let's see what this looks like so far. No, I forgot I messed up the first few frames. Let me just set the endpoint to here and hit RAM preview on that. Yeah, it's kind of cool. Mesh is a bit steppy intentionally, so if we look at, let's go back to where it gets brighter. So zoom in here. I have a displacement on here. Well, it's a bump map, I should say. If I set this to 0, we should get an update that does nothing. Cool. Set that to 100. 200. It's kind of interesting. Let's see if we just smooth this out instead of going for this like low poly look. I have this displacement map. If I click on it, let's see. I think I'm using this one, which is from JS Displacement, and it's just a oh, computer's pooping. It's just this like kind of nonsense squares. I think I'm using that one. Oh, these are 8K. Maybe I shouldn't use those. I didn't realize those were so high res. Let's see. Let's solo it in our comp here. Oh yeah, we're using one of those. Let's just use this different one. It's medium. Much smaller. I think that's 2048. So I'm just gonna delete these so I don't use them. Same for that one. So we have a couple of different ones. This one is like computer chippy. This is from an older JS displacement, but all the same. This one's kind of mod noisy, and that one's like mod noisy extreme. Kind of like this weird one better, but we'll use that for now. Let's go back to our shot here, and we're applying that to, let me turn off the footage too so we can just look at the stardust layer. So if I turn on smoothness right now, if we go to our model, you can see under here I have it not smoothing normals. So if I smooth normals, maybe increase this, we'll see a little bit of an adjustment, not really. We can go into our volume create and look at what it's doing. So our smooth is set to 0.1. What if we set this to 1? I might just have to like get in and out of After Effects. It's kind of acting wonky. Let's see if I do a RAM preview if it'll update. So we still have this like low poly tessellated look. Let's see how I'm creating that. Let's see if I can get rid of that. We could refine the model. We could do like a low. Oh, it's starting to do something. Medium. The displacement is really creating some chaos. Set that down to like 0. Yeah. So that displacement is really causing all of our low poly look. So if I increase that up slowly, let's go to like 15 and zoom in here. Yeah, let's easier see what it's doing. Let's create a new solid, actually a new comp. Let's call this text, and let's make this a 1024 square. And let's just do 100, or let's change the duration to 100. Probably need it longer than that, but this is fine. And then let's create a gradient. I find this is like the easiest way to see what's happening with your texture. So I'm gonna make this really tight. So we just have like a high contrast border there. And then I'm gonna drag this. This is a pre-comp, and we're gonna put it into our, oh, this is actually our comp. We're gonna drag this into there. And now we have this texture in here. And now if we apply, if we go to our material, and let's set this off and set this to none. And then let's go to diffuse and set our texture. Color from particle needs to be 0 if you want to use your texture here. And then you can kind of see how this texture is being applied better. And the other thing we can look at is, you can check this, which does a preview. And if we go to our preview settings, we can see that it's set to flat. Let's do wire, which looks crazy, but you can see our density is really high. So to combat this, there's two things though. First, let's look at what's causing the density. Is, we just turned on smoothing, which I'm going to turn this off. This is a refined model, and that's causing definitely most of that. It's trying to like create a smooth surface from our lower geo. So let me turn off this preview. You can see what that looks like, which isn't too bad. I mean, our bump map was causing a lot of that kind of faceting. But yeah, let's see here. Sorry, I was switching over to Twitter real quick. All right. Anyways, you can see how big our texture is. So that tile, we made that really tight contrasted tile. You can see how many times that's repeating And that is derived from a couple of things. So if we go to our volume create, there is a texture here. Or actually, sorry, not a texture. Our voxel size kind of dictates that, but also on our model, there's a texture mapping. You can see that it's using the model. And map orientation to a null. You could use a null to rotate it. So I could create like a new null and call this our text control. And we could go back to our model. I like to just select all and minimize when I'm doing this, and then when you click on it, it expands just that one. We're gonna set our text control there, and then we're gonna click on this, and we should be able to rotate this. I don't see any change. I wonder if that only applies to like spherical. Oh yeah. It really applies to only if you're doing spherical, not using the generated UVs from the mesh. That's interesting. Our texture is kind of gone though, so yeah, that's weird. I don't really understand that, to be honest. I feel like I need to figure that out because that seems pretty important. Yeah, sphere planar. Yeah, sphere definitely, like if you have like a texture, I noticed this, like say I wanted to bring in, let's just go grab something. Like what was I trying to do the other day? I was trying to do like something painterly, so do I have color washes? Can I see thumbnails? Here's like a space wash from History of America. If we bring this in, you can see that it's just a generic wash. Turn that off, and then if we go to material and we look at our diffuse here and set this to space wash, and maybe let's turn off our reflection for now so we can specifically see what it's doing. So there you can kind of see it is applying it across the surface, but in a very weird way, right? And then I think what the texture control, if you scale this, no, well, I guess that's purely for rotation, which is really weird. You'd think that usually when they use the nulls for adjustments, they allow you to kind of scale them, but it definitely is still texturing in a bizarre way. This is definitely something that I haven't been playing with yet. I've been trying to mostly, the texture is really big. Let's replace it with the pre-comp. Move our pre-comp to our pre-comp folder. Sometimes like what I like to do is, well, that is, I guess it's it's really big. It's like 5,000 by, let's make that like a normal size. Let's do 2048 by 2048. And then let's do a motion tile. And here we can kind of dial this in to be much smaller. At least we can see that white bit. Let's just mirror it for this purpose. Yeah, I don't really see those white bits. Yeah, I really haven't been playing with textures. I've mostly been using kind of like the subsurface or reflection kind of things, just because I feel like this is kind of something I haven't really figured out yet. But it is cool. They're giving you control. I don't really know what the like proposed size that you should be using for that is. That's probably the bigger issue, because I've noticed that there's a correlation between the voxel size. Like if I increase this to 20, well, it's gonna mess up everything. Let me hold Alt and remove my offset and filter. And let's, so if I do one, oops, wrong place. Where's my smooth? There's my smooth. Let's turn that to 0. Yeah, just really don't get a lot of detail. I don't really understand the actual proposed workflow for applying textures to this, because it just doesn't really seem to work. If I do go back to model, I mean, it's such a tight tile. I mean, I can delete that motion tile. I mean, it's still such a small square that it's applying across it. I mean, when I increased this, I noticed that that increased my actual size. Your model has to go up to 45. Yeah. Which kind of helps, but still your tile is like so small that I don't really know what the reason for that is. So as that gets bigger, your tile gets bigger, but I mean, then you're dealing with like a really blocky source, so it's not really what you want. And I mean, at that UV scale there, you're not really able to kind of tile anything coherently to make like a texture. Like if I wanted this to feel like paint swirls, it's not like you could apply a texture to that and have it feel good. I mean, that's what I originally was trying to do in some of my tests, like where I would just make a fractal and then, oops, well, whatever, that proves the point. It's not what I was trying to do. I mean, you just get this like repeated texture that's just not very pretty. Anyways, I'm gonna stop playing with textures because I think that's just annoying. But what I was trying to say, well, let me turn off that and just go back to color from particle. The bump amount. I mean, I was playing with this last night and I really was trying to get like a weird look. I knew that that texture would cause weirdness, so I was intentionally trying to do that. And then I was also like, let's see, I wasn't smoothing the normals, or I set the smooth angle threshold to like 1, or I think that's as low as you can go. Yeah, I guess it'll accept 0. Just so that I could get much more of like a unrefined look. And then I think my model, I probably had set, to off. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That's it. Yeah, any questions? I mean, there's 5 people. If you jump in and chat and say anything, we're just spitballing here, so we'll do whatever. Let's see. Let me turn off the volume here. We can look at just what the particles are doing. Oh, I am scaling. I have my transform linked to just the model, but if I connect this to the particles, I won't need to connect it there. But my particles are set to cache right now, so if I go back up to the top and I hey Chris, you should just grab the trial. It's really fun. It's really interesting. At first, you know, like especially if you look at one of my first videos that I made for this, I was directly comparing it to trap code because I got a lot of questions. People were like, why not just use particular or, you know, form or something? And I think at first that was a valid kind of thought. Like it's either you liked the node based workflow or you didn't. But then as I started adding more and more and more features, I think that became 2 separate conversations. Like I think particular is great for people who need to do very specific stuff, but like these 2 don't compare anymore. Like there's volumes, there's 3D models, there's physics, there's the ability to kind of like emit from all different kinds of objects and object faces and edges, and they added some new like wireframe stuff in here that we can look at. There's just like so much, it's crazy. It's like particular form 3D stroke Lux had a baby. Yes. Yeah, and even they added volumetrics recently too, so that's game changer. But still, you know, like those are plugins that I still own and use. You know, it's not like I stopped using those. It's just this is like I've been experimenting with this so much that I can kind of get through setups really fast. So I find it inherent to my workflow that I can kind of jump in here and create things. And the other cool thing is that you can make your own presets. So there is like a healthy preset library that they've put together. But what's cool is that you can kind of just like say, I really liked this setup and I wanted to save it. You could just hit save a preset, and then you could like have this set up to throw into any scenes, which I find really cool. I purchased when it came out. Hey, Kyle. Yeah, free time is definitely tricky. I'm kind of like a night owl, so my wife goes to bed like at like 10 o'clock ish, and then I usually stay up and play with things. I mean, if I don't have side projects or work to do, I like to experiment, and this has kind of been like a fun thing to experiment inside of After Effects because it's kind of so quick. And then they keep adding stuff so fast that it's hard for me to keep up to it. This setup, I should just reopen this because I think I kind of messed up this scene. This is something I was playing with last night. I didn't, well, I'll RAM preview some more here. I think I need to turn off, oh, that's what I was doing earlier. I got sidetracked, sorry. Under physics, I have it set to freeze. So basically I cached it, and then you can just kind of use that cache so that it calculates faster. And so now I turned it back on and it should calculate physics again. I have no idea what I was doing though. Let's see here. That doesn't look like it's doing physics at all, like 0% physics. I've been having I'm in 2018. I feel like I've been having so much issues with 2018 lately. It's just like hard crashing on me and won't quit. I kind of switched to 2019 recently to play. Maybe I should do that. Yeah, let's jump into 2019. Oh, you know what? I wonder if I made... let's open up this. Hi, Kim. This is not a smoke. This was, if I reopen it, something I was playing with last night. I was just trying... I had this shot that I did from the downtown library in LA. I shot this kind of... I thought there was this cool globe light, and I thought it'd be a fun shot to try to track something into. Except I was on auto exposure, so my phone was exposing like crazy. And sorry, just opened up a different After Effects in the middle of my explanation. Oh, that's fun. We'll play with that too. And so I had this, and so I had an idea of like, I was like, oh, well, let's start simple. Let's just make a null with a light parented to it, going in a circle, emitting particles, and then let's try to mesh that. And so I created that, and this is kind of what this is, but then I was playing with like a bump map to affect the surface and kind of create this like weird low poly thing, which is what me and Aaron were talking about before you guys jumped in, was like just trying to figure out how the texturing works. I haven't done a lot of texturing, so by default, if I go to the model here, not to retread back on this, but under texture mapping, you can do model, sphere, planar. And model, it's like trying to generate UVs across the surface, but they're so small that like it's tiling so tight that it's really hard to control. So my bump map is just creating all these like severe weird anomalies, which I can just turn off, and it looks like a smooth kind of cool fluid surface. Maybe not. See, that's what I'm talking about. Like, this is 2018 is just being so funky to me. Like, I don't understand it. Like, if I purge, which I just purged like a minute ago, no, it's still broke. So it's just me. I'm just kidding. That's just me. So anyways, it was this weird fluid circular sim thing. I have no idea. I was just trying to make something last night, and I was actually very unhappy with where this was at, so I gave up actually. What's funny though is like if we go back, like this is version 5. I think if I go back some, go to open recents. Each iteration I feel like was kind of looking interesting, and I'd be like, well, I should version up. So I think in this version, let's see, Oh, I was trying to get the volume light to work with it, and I couldn't get the volume light to correctly work. I think my scene scale is so big. That's kind of like the issue with just tracking random shots, is that 2019 is the same. Yeah, liquid simulations. I think that's kind of what I'm doing with this in a way. So yeah, that was weird. And then if we go back another version, let's see what that looks like. Oh, I think that was just kind of like the start of it starting to look like something. Doesn't look interesting. Maybe that's probably as far back as we can go. But this other shot, I'll go back to. I feel like, oh, that's kind of the start. So let me close this. Let's jump into 2019 and see if 2019 is going to be nicer to us or not. So this is the setup that I did. Oh, you know what? None of this is cached either. But is it cached? Let's see here. Physics on. No, I didn't cache the volume or the physics. So this could run faster if I did both of that, but then we couldn't play with it. So I'm going to minimize that. We're not going to look at that. So this is basically kind of like a fluid simulation. Hold on, I'm going to close my door real quick. All right. Oh, that's playing really slow. But yeah, I mean, they added, it's not a liquid simulation, but it's close, right? It's particles that are physics based. So I have spheres emitting, and they added a new force that connects them. So it's basically drawing a chain in between each particle. So the particles are trying to stay connected to each other as they fall. And then I made the text surface a collider. So they're hitting that. And then I increased the friction. Well, this is processor intensive specifically because of I didn't know what I was doing. This was the first test I did this. And my meshing is set really high. So basically like the voxels, like me saying I didn't know what I was doing. Like I think when you're doing meshing like this, your scene scale is so important so that your voxel size, which is basically the grid, needs to be the right density. So I was kind of in a like smaller scene size scale, and I had to make my voxels tighter in order to get some detail. And when you do that, it instantly becomes kind of processor heavy. But I mean, for doing this, like I said, there's no caching involved in this, and so I mean, I don't know, I don't find that incredibly slow, but it's still, I don't know, to be doing this in After Effects is crazy anyways. But yeah, so the physics are colliding with the text, and then I have an auxiliary tree which is creating particles from those particles which create the trails. And then so I kind of wanted it to drip down, and so I found that if I made the trails and then had them carry the velocity of the particles, the initial particles, and then go downwards, that kind of created that effect. And then what else do I have? So I think that's pretty much the dynamics. And then I'm meshing both of those particles. So ideally, the ideal workflow would be for this would be to not do the volume, right? You would just kind of like not worry about this part. You would run your physics. So there's all my spheres, right? And then you would, so let's see what that looks like. They're really small. So you can see they're colliding, and they're kind of like grouping together, and they kind of start falling over. And as they start falling over, then you can see that there's trails that are being created from those initial ones that are falling. So yeah, you would run this, right? Like let's say like that was my simulation just for show and tell, so we don't have to do all of it. So that's pretty heavy, right? What makes this heavy is the chain, I think, for the amount of particles that I'm asking it to simulate is is kind of heavy. I don't think the physics part is that really as much that heavy. I do have it set to very high to calculate, because if you don't have it set to high, if you just have it set to high, I feel like it kind of can interpenetrate a lot. So I usually set that to very high. And then since I just RAM previewed that, it created cache, so I could set this to freeze. And then when I played it back again, it should technically go much faster. I mean, looks semi-faster. Yeah. Yeah, so to get the mesh around it, I definitely was playing with like kind of the offset filtering. So I mean, that goes faster, right? That's like not incredibly faster, but it's not calculating it now. So now, say if you were just gonna like dial in this look, you would then kind of like play with like materials and your lighting and all of that, so that you're not calculating and trying to go for the aesthetic. So that's that, right? And then what I would do is then turn on my meshing, connect these two back up, and then right click and do, enable. And so then it's going to start meshing that. And then what I would do is go to, so now that physics is set to that, I'll go to my volume cache and I would turn that on. And then go back to frame 0, RAM preview that. I mean, at this step before, I mean, I guess you could do it with the cache on. What you could do is you could either dial it in, set it to off, and then dial in your mesh. And then once you're happy with your mesh, you could cache it and then play with materials. Or you could kind of just keep caching, and then if you were playing with settings and you liked it, you already had a cache, so you wouldn't have to worry about it. But this way, I can preview it. Let's just say I'm like pretty happy with this and I think it's cool, which it's fine for what it is. I mean, it was my first test kind of doing this. There's definitely a lot that I would play with and dial in, but this is where I was. So that's cool. And then we can just come over here to volume cache and set that to freeze as well. And then now it's not going to calculate that mesh anymore. It's just going to use what it already made. And then you could dial in your shader. So let's say like I think this subsurface is like too high, which it is intentionally, but it is. So I have my subsurface scatter radius set to 200. I could do 100, and that would already kind of start to bring that in. But I kind of wanted this to feel really gelatinous, so I was trying to get it to push as far as it could. And then the secondary settings are really all under here. So if we go to subsurface, here it's set to 200 as well. So if I drop this down to 100, you can see it doesn't, go as far. But I think maybe we should leave that there, and maybe it's just the scatter is, what if we did 1 instead of 5? Maybe 15, 30, 60. That's interesting. So yeah, I mean, you can kind of basically, since it's cached, it's much easier to come in here and dial in these settings than if you were trying to like mesh it and do the physics and do the look all at once. I think that is like a slower approach, which is how I made it. But it's because I was doing it late at night and I was just trying to figure it all out. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of, I don't know if that's better. It's different. I don't know if it's better. It doesn't get as hot, I guess. I mean, really the culprit is my light that I have up here is pointing directly at this, which is causing that hot spot since it's like the closest. Like if I went to a 3/4 view here. Wow, that look is changing so much based on the background geo. I didn't realize that. It's kind of weird. That's really weird. Anyways, you can see this spotlight is pointing, was it angle based? Oh, that's so weird. I don't understand what's happening. Anyways, that spotlight is pointed like right at it. That's what it is. That's what it's meant to look like, a face hugger. This intensity is 300. Let's set this to like red. Wow. I mean, those colors really drive so much of that look. It's crazy. I mean, that comes from also, I wonder what, oh, my color is almost white though. I wonder if this was a color. That's kind of cool. As it starts falling off the subsurface further over here, it gets, you know, because this is kind of like counter color, right? You're not picking the actual color of the subsurface. This is kind of like what the scatter would be where it's darker. So it's kind of interesting. But that's definitely driving a lot of that look. So if I switch this to white, I think we can see, yeah. I think the original color, it's not reading anything from the particle. Yeah, so it's 0. So yeah, it's kind of, subsurface is really interesting in here. It's kind of like also being scene specific or scene scale specific. You know, it's kind of a little tricky to dial in, but I don't know. It's cool that you can even do that in here. So it's kind of fun to play with regardless. Face hugger. Now I have to make a face hugger animation. Thanks, guys. Yeah, and also you can see we have the shadows, which is amazing that our mesh is casting those shadows. I think if my diffusion is set to 0, if I increase this, should be able to get some nice fall off. Yeah, look at that. It's a little better. Get a more dramatic feel. Yeah, that's this animation. I think, yeah, this, so like I said, this was kind of like, I got early access a couple of days before the release, and Aaron from the Superluminal team basically was like, here, what do you think of what we've added? And I was like, it was absolutely insanity. I don't even know where to start. So I was trying to figure it out. And so I had like a couple of days to do a couple of tests, and I think they were very simple. Let's see, if I go to my IGX, I have a, if you see anything you're not supposed to see, just ignore it. I don't know what you're not supposed to see. This is a final animation with some color correction. I made, sorry, we're just going through in the wrong order here. That is not meshed. Oh, here we go. So this, oh no, this is my tutorial. Here we go. This is what I first made. I made a point emitter, and it was emitting outwards, and I meshed it, and playing with some of like the new refractive and subsurface stuff, I was able to make this thing. This was like the very first test I did. And so, of course, immediately I was like, oh man, you could do so much cool stuff with this. Like, I wanted to do text dripping, but I was just having a hard time figuring out how to emit particles from a specific part of the text. Like, say, if I wanted to emit particles only from like the tops of the A and Y. The cool thing about this is that it's all procedural. So this is using, like, I have this text in here. So I could just type in Kyle. And technically, yeah, there you go. Everything would update except for we're cached. So it wouldn't update. But if I set this to volume cache off and physics set to on, we should be able to RAM preview that. Oh, look at that. It just died. It's like, I'm just kidding. What is that? Come on. There we go. I think it's because I started previewing, or I was RAM previewing while clearing the cache, and then it did that. Is my guess? I don't know. Oh, it's just all messed up now. Oh my gosh. Let's version up. Let's purge everything. I'm so sorry, After Effects. Didn't mean to upset you. I have no idea what I was even going to say, but I was trying to keep this all procedural. So trying to create some sort of emitter that was emitting from the tops of these letters, I found very difficult. So I didn't do that. But so I started with just creating a box emitter above it. And then so I did a mesh on the actual type, and then was emitting above it and having those drop down and create kind of trails, which was interesting. I you know what it reminded me of was like when Fields first came out. I think it was like, maybe it was Tim who did the tutorial where he had like the letters dripping, and maybe Grayscale has done a tutorial on that. I wanted to create something like that. And it was interesting, but you could just see where the particles were coming from. So it didn't feel like the text was necessarily dripping. It just felt like there was a box emitter above it emitting particles on it. So I don't know. And then I ended up just making this. I was like, well, fine. We'll just fully embrace the random emitter above our type and just go for it. And that's kind of what we made. But yeah, I liked the idea of keeping it procedural so that you could come in here and just change out the type instead of like me going in and modeling text that only had like the top's faces to emit from. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe I could do a workaround where I use like a field to affect the particle size, which kind of worked, but it created a bunch of weirdness in it. So I just didn't do it. But like say with this setup, what's cool is like, I chose not to do that. Let's see here. Oh, it's so weird how it wants to jump back to that memory of that. It's like, no, I remember simulating up there. We're going to do that. I also, I think I also still have the beta installed. I don't think I have the final release. That's probably most of my problems too. I probably just need to update. No idea. Anyways. Oh, so with this, what you could do is like, you could also feed in the text to this. So let's see, where is my text? Oh, up here. Open group. And there is text. So there's a text visible. I could draw a line to here. Oops. And mesh the text too. Apparently we're just gonna have to like purge. Apparently 2019 is not gonna help us. 2018, 2019, it doesn't matter. It's just like, I do what I want. Yeah, it's just like, it doesn't care. It's being so weird. Yeah, I don't know. We're gonna go back to 2018. Screw 2019. Yeah, Spider-Man love. No offense to JR or Mitch. I just had to replace it though. Well, there we go. All right. Switch to Stardust. Let's just make this from scratch so we can just feel like that's more educational anyways. So what I was trying to say was like, let's say make this, apply Stardust. We have our emitter. Cool. Let's say we create some new text. Say hello. Man, that's a terrible font. Can we pick anything else? I think I have like the Sega Genesis photo logo. Yeah, Sega. Cool. So what you can do is delete this. Well, let's just disable it. Probably need it. Create a model, and that model. Sorry, this text just messed up my whole layout here. Model, and that model we want it to be text, right? And then that text we want it to be hello. So now we have, well, let's make a camera. And then we have 3D geometry, which I think it's, let me just bring in an HDRI, because it's always easier just to see stuff with an HDRI. Just grab like a studio, make a new comp from that, drop that into our comp. Go up to rendering, environment, turn that on. There we go. Now we have some sort of definition. Cool. So then what we can do is, well, you should probably, let's see, you can add a volume, connect that. And so this is going to be volume create. Oh, did I label that? No. And then we need to output that to another model. So let's grab that and connect that. And then now we have a volume being created from our text layer. So that's cool, right? So then what I was saying is that, you know, what I wanted was this. Let's enable this again. And then I don't know how I double clicked on that. Let's make this well, we'll just keep it a point for now. And then if we move it up, let's make it directional, 0 direction span, and let's do -90, I think is down. Oh, just kidding. 90 is down. So if we play that, basically you get particles that are moving down really slowly. Let's just do less. So this is kind of like our drip idea, right? So if I move this over, let's move it over so it aligns to something. And then I think if I go to my top view, we need to move it back in Z a little bit. Oops, sorry, back. And then let's go back to our active camera. So there we have it. If we look, it's going through, and then what you could do is just grab this and add that to our mesher. And then we probably need to set this to model. And let's set its lifespan to maybe 4, and let's give it a bigger 25. Let's give it randomness, random size. And then let's do box. Let's set the Y to like 1. X, we want it big. Okay, not that big, like 400. And then Z, let's do 50. And then if we ran preview that, now it's like combining both of those things. So it's looking at those particles, and then as they move closer, it decides that they should all be a surface, and then it like meshes them, which is pretty cool. Now the opposite thing that you can do, which I saw in I don't even know his name, the other Stardust tutorial artist who does amazing stuff. What is his name? Now I feel bad. Well, let's see, let's go to my history. No idea. I lost it. Oh well. I'll have to link in the credits to him, but in his tutorial he was showing like how booleans work. So what you can do is, instead of connecting this there, there's a second node over here. If you see this green one, you can connect this there. And you could set the operation to rolling. I don't know. Is that the one that was on Lester Banks? I feel like there's only like other Stardust videos that I watch. Yeah, this. Oh yeah, there you go. It was rolling. You are 100% correct. My new layout comes from Roland too. I used to have this on the right side, but there's something kind of nice about having this like immediacy of your effects panel right next to your window. But yes, Roland, he does such great videos. He totally knows what he's talking about when he does it, and I'm kind of like, I don't know. I put this slider here because I think this is what it does, and usually I'm like close, but anyways, he was playing with booleans. So if I go to this volume create, and thank you by the way, and we do difference, you can see that it kind of like starts like cutting through our surface, which is pretty rad. You can do a lot of cool stuff with that for sure. Bloop. It's pretty amazing. So the other thing we need to look at is our mesh actually. So in the new one, they added this preview. So if we click preview, we can see what our actual wireframe looks like. And under preview, you have a couple of options. You can show just wire. So you're basically like seeing through, or you can do flat. So the geo's there, but the wireframe's on top. This is like also something that Roland was doing that what's funny is like Aaron was asking me if I had played with this yet. And I was like, I haven't played with that. And then I realized how powerful it was. And I was like, oh shit, I should have been using this because it's great to figure out what your density is. So that is not too bad actually. So if I just start from there, it's pretty cool what it's doing. So with this, I think this is one of those situations where if you were playing with the create and then you set the mesh properties adaptive, I think this is one of those instances, since it's like, yeah, adaptive's cool because it's basically going to look at like your areas that are that it can create lower quality faces for, and then the areas where it needs the resolution, it can kind of keep it. And what's nice is like that frees you up from all this resolution, which also if we come over to our model, the path samples really defines this. So if I lower this to like 2, it's not going to update. It's going to make me look like a liar. Oh, maybe it's my bevel. There's a bevel on. So if I do bevel 1 and bevel depth 1. Well, I thought it was adding all these edge details because of the bevel, but it doesn't even really seem that the bevel is really doing a lot to the adaptiveness there. Let's see, let me turn off adaptive and see how that affects it. So there's our mesh detail. If I do bevel segment 6 and 4, yeah, it doesn't really add. I kind of thought it was adding a lot of detail along those edges. It's really not affecting it that much. I thought it had a greater effect. I mean, I normally try to leave this like off so that it just doesn't add detail there, but seems fine. But it seems like that adaptive would be really good for situations where you're doing this kind of subtractive or difference mode, so that you're like leaving all this generic information to be lower quality while your area that you definitely want to focus on, let that be where the higher resolution mesh is. I mean, that's just rad. I don't even understand how they're doing this inside of After Effects. It's just so crazy to me. Turn off this preview. So that's cool. The other thing you can do, which is nice, is like you could, I mean, you can affect these particles however you wanted. So you could do pretty much like any type of deformer, or I think turbulence is kind of interesting. So if we add turbulence and we say, let's disable our mesh for a second. So this is kind of interesting too with the volume stuff. Is by default it normally creates spheres. So if you don't have a model hooked up, usually it defaults those to spheres. I'm not really sure why they were cubes right then. It's kind of interesting that it was like doing primitive. I mean, I guess it's because it's applying a model and it's set to the default file, and when it's set to default file it uses the default primitive, and the default primitive is cube. But the way that I was explained to it from the team was that by default it's always going to use spheres, and no matter unless you change that type, then it's going to do spheres. So then when you mesh it, it's going to create those, even if like I didn't have this created before, like I didn't have that there, and it was still creating spheres because that's just what it does by default. But if you wanted it to be a different object, or you wanted to load in your own OBJ, you could pick something here, and as long as you have it attached, I think it's going to look at that and mesh that. But by default it's spheres. But so let's disconnect that just so we can see what our geo's doing. And then let's add this turbulence. Let's do it on the X, and let's change this to axis. Hey, GUI, your stuff is pretty fantastic. Yeah, it's fun. Here we're just kind of dicking around, not up to anything, but if anyone has questions, I do try to answer them. But so far it's just kind of playing around and showing what this is doing. So yeah, let's add some turbulence in the X. Maybe that's a lot, but maybe increase our scale, and then let's do our fractal speed at like 15. So let's see what this looks like. So as they're moving downwards, they're basically following through this turbulence. They're moving left to right. So then let's create that, or let's connect that back up to our volume. Actually, we had our volume created from our text, and then our Boolean was coming from our spheres. So that creates some craziness. So then the other thing we could do is, like right now I just have the create without any filters or offsets, but you could, let's go back into wireframe and look at this, what it's doing. What's cool is one of my new favorite features, which I tweeted about the other day, but you can just grab a node and drag it, and when it turns green, it's going to connect, which is awesome. So let's make this a offset. And then there's two options in here. There's like dilate, erode, and then there's offset. So we can subtract. And it really is kind of like taking that mesh and eroding from the outside in, which is kind of cool. And then when it's creating these booleans, it's creating some interesting shapes. Or we could do it the opposite. Let's go positive, and we're adding geo outside. It's kind of reminds me of like a shell inside of 3ds Max for the Max users. I feel like I'm the only one back in the day, but that's what that reminds me of. So I mean, offset pretty much works the same way, but I think is mostly on adding geo, whereas like the dilate erode is eating away at it. But like this, like you could go big and it would really draw connections amongst all of its neighbors. And then positive, I feel like just smooths it out and kind of, while it is looking at the nearest neighbor, it's also using those to kind of like smooth it better or different. So it creates like very weird results. But we're going to keep it on dilate, erode a little bit into it. And then we're going to follow that up with a filter. So let's look at that. We're going to call this V filter. Keep it semi-tidy. I didn't name anything above here, but filter. And if we set this to 1, we can just leave it at the default and see what it's trying to do. So if we set this to like 3, so it kind of does the same thing as the offset, where it is looking at the nearest neighbors and then is smoothing it based on that. But here you get more options. There's different algorithms. So there's like a Gaussian, which creates definitely like a much more smoother step. And there's also iterations, so you can have more you know, blurs in that, I guess would be the proper description of that. And then you can do median, which reminds me of the After Effects median, where it's looking at min-max of nearest neighbors, I would assume. Mean curvature, which I would, again, assume that it's looking at the actual curvature of the shape, so that if it was more of like a 90 degrees, it's not trying to smooth that, but where it's more organic, it's smoothing it. But I have no idea. I kind of like this one the most out of these different filters. And there's lapellation, which I don't know. I don't know. The other cool feature that they added is that you can hold down Alt and remove things without breaking the tree, which is cool. Oh, so now that I move it, it's like, oh yeah, I was doing something. Yeah. Looks cool. Let's turn off our mesh display again. The only other thing that I wish you could do that I can't seem to figure out is I wish you could get the color from the particle for the mesh. I think that would be really cool. So like, let's say I wanted to mesh just these particles that were falling, and I wanted to hide this. Like, in my head, I'm thinking like, okay, let's go and set my particle color, and I want it to be red, right? And then if you come here to your material, oh, I don't have material. That's why everything looks weird. My bad. Forgot to totally hook that up. If we have a model, or sorry, model is just getting the information. Diffuse, you would think that like color from particle, it's getting color from particle. We set that to red solid color, and that is not red. Just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I would think you'd be able to pass that information, but it just doesn't for some reason. Because like ideally what I would want is like random from gradient, and then you would pick like a, you know, some crazy gradient, and then if we turn this off. Oh, I wonder if I need to hook. And usually this doesn't matter here. So if I hook up a material, it's getting that, and then if I mesh that, yeah, it's still not getting that color information. I just don't understand that. Like, why wouldn't it? It seems like it would. Seems like it'd be cool. Maybe I'm just asking for too much. That's what it is. But you know, because like what I think is like, you know, say you're gonna do like a water simulation of some sort. Like, I would do like a color over life and pick like a, you know, some sort of like blue gradient. And then in my head, I'm like, well, yeah, cool. When you're meshing, use that so that you could almost do like a velocity based shading type thing. But it really just doesn't want to do it. It just doesn't really care. I don't know if that's just like something that's missing right now. Maybe it will be there, but definitely something I have to ask about. In the meantime, you can make some cool stuff. Any questions or anything you guys want to look at? Or should I make from scratch or build or something? I have no idea what I'm doing, so I'm just playing around. You guys are here for the learning or hanging out, so it's up to you. This is the best animation I've ever made in my life. Let's model this text again, or let's mesh this text, and then let's change the voxel size to 8, 5, 3. Ooh, that's super heavy. 8. Let's see what that looks like with the wireframe on. What if we do intersection? That's probably a cool way to like reveal type. If we made our box bigger. If we did a, have you played with the advect at all? I have not played with the advect, mostly because if you go over here and go to Superluminal and you go to their support and you go to their user guide and we go to volumes, advect performs volume advection using the flow noise. Caution, this is very slow to process. This is pretty much why I haven't played with it. It's very slow, and when you don't know what you're doing, making things slow just isn't helpful at all. So let's create a new project and let's look at it. So we're going to make a new solid. We're going to call this stardust. We're going to apply stardust, and let's just make a default preset. Let's do, what could we do? Let's just do a text. And let's do that. It's kind of cool. And I'm just like, sorry, I'm just trying to think through. I just don't think that that is going to really be that effective. So let's just make a default. What I want to do is probably make a, let's do a mask. I think that would probably be the easiest way to see what it's doing. So let's create a circle mask. And then turn that off. We're going to delete this text because we're not using it. Let's set our background to be transparent so we can see what's happening. Let's set this to model. Let's set this to 20. We're just going to emit based on our mask. We're going to do once, edge weighted, and mask. So now we have that. And I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. And then I'm going to create a camera so that I can rotate. All right, so here's basically a mask emitting once, and I don't want it to move actually, so I'm just going to set this to 0. And then I don't want it to have depth, so there's our default. And it's set to subdivide right now, so if I lower this, which is increasing it, we get less subdivisions. So there, it's a good amount of points. So let's create our default setup again. Let's mesh this and let's create a model. And right now, let me set this to primitive sphere so we can see what we're dealing with. So our size is okay. I probably want to make this bigger based on how it's going to mesh it. So I'm just anticipating what it's probably going to try to do. So let's make this a little bit bigger. And then let's mesh that. And let's increase our particle size, because our particle size default is just not really good for meshing. So we're going to do 25. And then there we can start to see something. I'm going to turn on AO. And I'm also going to turn on the environment again. I'm going to bring that into here. Except this time, I will hook up a material so that we can actually see what it's doing. Let's set our diffuse to a color that we can see. Set it from particle 0. And let's set our reflection to a good amount. There we go. We have like a very reflective surface. All right, so now let's introduce the advect and let's see what happens. So we go do this, drag here, and then we're going to do advect. And so if we RAM preview the default settings, we get nothing. It just doesn't even want to play. See, this is what I'm talking about. So our mesh density isn't that high. Ugh. Come on, After Effects. Work with us. Just constantly purging to try to get it to work. RAM preview, and what do we have? I'll drink water. Hold on. Nothing. It breaks. See? And then you wonder why. I tell you, I haven't played with this. Let's set the amount to maybe like 10. Let's back off like an incredibly amount. Let's set the scale higher to 300. And let's set the advect vector to, I don't even know what that value does. Let's do 10. And then we're still not getting anything. So we're going to save this. We'll just save this to our desktop. Maybe. No. Done. Dunzo. Wow. It's so frustrating. Just like completely ate it. Oh, interesting. It would crash if you weren't doing anything. I was trying to feed it like a simple basic like setup, like, well, if nothing's moving, then we can kind of really see what the advect is doing. But apparently that's not the case, huh? Well, that sucks. Let's try this one more time. Let's see how fast we can crash it again. Don't be sorry. That's what we're here for. Stardust, right? Oh my gosh, that's bokeh. What happened to all of my favorites? 2019 hates me. All right, cool. So we'll just stick with this default emitter then. Let's just make it so that the speed over life goes down like really quick so that we basically get a ball. Okay, let's maybe do that a little bit bigger. So basically our particles are emitting outwards, they slow down to 0 and then die. So this seems like a good contender. Let's also increase our particle size to 15, 20, and let's do 3 in their life. And let's create our volume again and our model and our material. And let's connect that. Oops. Let's set our particle type to model just so that we have that there. And actually, one last thing, let's change the randomness and their size. Ooh, maybe that's too much. Okay. So our volume is being created and it's meshing. Oh, let's bring back in our HDRI. Oh, I forgot to pre-comp that. I just like to have it pre-comped so that if I want to swap it out later. Let's add that to our render settings, environment. Sorry, we're kicking this back. And then let's save so that if we crash again, inevitably we'll have something. So let's just call this advect crasher. Cool, so there's our setup. It looks like it's meshing it fine. Maybe we want our volume to be bigger and our particle min size is 15, right? Is that what we set? 20? And let's maybe have more particles. It's not really a great mesh setup. What if I added in an offset? There, at least we're connecting things now. All right, so that's our base, right? So let's save that. Okay, let's go to our, set this to offset 1, so that when we go to 0, there's something there, right? All right, so this is looking like something. I think it's tough because it already has so much randomness that it's hard. It's gonna be, I feel like it's gonna be hard to tell what advect is gonna do, but let's try it anyways. So we're gonna drop that in. We'll switch this to advect. And there we go. At least we're getting it to affect it now. I just think that our setup is so stringy to begin with. It's just not that interesting. So here we can at least kind of start to see what it's doing, which is like it's cutting through it basically. So let's reduce down the amount. Yeah. I don't understand what this, like, why doesn't that affect it? Or that? That does. What are you doing? Oh, I don't have a camera. Can we turn on helpers? Is there a helper for advect? Apparently not. So we don't get to know what that's doing. I have no idea what that is doing. Like, this is definitely telling it which vector to affect, which that seems to work. Time, I don't understand why time would shift it in a direction. And then I don't understand why advect vector wouldn't, like, why does 100 by default there, but it's not affecting it any. I mean, this is what it's doing. It's like creating these like cutouts. It's almost like you're creating a noise map to move it, but by moving it, you're kind of like pushing those values to 0, which is then like creating cutouts in a sense. But when I think of advect, I think of like, you know, like a fluid sim where you're advecting it and it's like creating curls or turbulence. I don't necessarily think of it as like creating like negative space. And it's just weird to me that the amount just doesn't affect it. Like, I don't understand that. So yeah, I think that sums up why I haven't been using advect, is because I do not know anything about it. I do not understand what it's doing. What's funny though is like in their videos, they have like an advect video that is like really cool. It's like has like I think it's kind of like the default S that they like to make videos with, and it just is like doing some kind of cool offsetting. And it seems like they're getting to do cool stuff, but I have a feeling it's either it's like scene dependent. Like, I feel like maybe this scene just isn't big enough. Like, what if we make these go really far out? And then we So let's disconnect it just to look at what our particles are doing. So our particles are emitting outwards and they're stopping. I still don't think that is interesting enough. Let's do a ring, 90 degrees, 10, and 0 outwards. So there is a ring with particles emitting outwards, right? So let's create, well, I'm just trying to get something interesting that like as a surface to play with. See, like our advect isn't doing like nearly as crazy as an effect on this, right? I was trying to get just like a bigger surface to play with, but I feel like that is not, still not really doing what I thought it would do. I mean, it seems like in the beginning, like it's starting to cut out, or there it goes. And it's creating something interesting. Yeah, you can see in the center, it's like definitely like warping and like creating a noise pattern and creating these kind of like holes, but that doesn't mean I understand what it's doing. What if we have it set to advect the Y by 55? Nothing. See, I wish this was more like feedback, like where I wish I could adjust something and then like get some feedback to understand what it's doing, but it just doesn't. Like it doesn't want to let me know what it's doing. And I still don't understand why time pushes it. Because that looks cool. I don't know what that is doing. It's like doing like a slip scan or something. Like that thing is like crazy looking. It seems like it's doing like a time displacement where it's like, okay, we're going to push it in Y based on these values below, which are 15x, 55y. And you can see the actual like scale of the noise here though. Like how big and bulbous that is. I think that's definitely like my noise scale being set to 150. But that is such a weird animation. Like, let's set this to like 50. Wow. Okay, so, all right, started to make sense, right? A little bit. Not really, but a little bit. You know, a lot of these values are contingent, right? So these advect X, Y, and Z were basically null until there was a value here. So it's basically asking like over time, we're going to advect it this much and in these X, Y, Zs. So that part makes sense. And then the vector also is tied to that. So if it wasn't affecting it over time, it apparently wasn't using this value, which I still don't necessarily understand, but at least I kind of understand. And then now that it's moving, my assumption is that now I can tell it how fast to actually evolve the fractal over time. I mean, I think our meshing is still crap. I think it'd be kind of nice if I did, what does a smooth look like? Oh, I don't think I can smooth it. Adaptive really doesn't work, and I bet you if I smooth it here, that's not really going to do the trick either. It's just going to make it. So what we need is a bigger particle size, I guess. So what if we did like 40? Yeah, there we go. I mean, this really wants, like, for like the voxel grid size, it really wants bigger particle sizes. So now that we have that 40, let's set our minimum to 30, 35. Cool. Let's see what that does. At least we have something now. Like, it's kind of interesting. Again, we're emitting from a ring, which is going outwards, which is then getting totally thrown through like a turbulent noise field. And creating our cool milk simulation. I mean, that is just bizarre. At least it works. At least we're both not crazy. It just was very dependent upon some settings there. Like, that is bizarre. I do not know what project you're going to need that for, but now you have it. So what we could do is, to finish off our milk look, we're going to add a spotlight. We're going to add a little warmth to that spotlight. We're going to set it to 300. We're going to say that that's fine. We're going to rotate it in its X, and we don't care about the orientation. We're going to move that over. Nice. And then move it up. There we go. Now we've got a cool milk look. Then if we go to our material settings, we can set it to subsurface on. And we need to go to the top and turn on subsurface up here. Do we have AO on? Nope. Hey! Manuk? Or, yeah, right? Right? What are you doing? I have no idea what I'm doing. We're playing with volumes inside of Stardust currently. Aaron wanted us to experiment with advect, and we both had zero luck with it, so we thought it would be fun. Let's see here. Let's mix our lights and environment so that we get more of that. Yeah, that's cool. Now we're starting to see that, right? That subsurface. So if I turn this off, and then on, and then off, and then on, we don't see any difference, huh? Our light is just really, really bright. Let's set our diffuse to not white. Let's set it to like a grayish, and let's make sure we set our color from particle to 0. That gives us a good base. We definitely want this reflective, and we definitely want it a little, do we want it rough? We want it kind of rough, right? Like 75? Well, maybe that's too much. Maybe that was right. This is the first time I've ever streamed in my life before. This is a new thing. We're just checking it out and seeing if there's any interest. So that's kind of interesting. It's doing something. I think our subsurface really isn't doing much yet. What if we picked a color like red? Yeah, there's something. Something is starting to happen. It's definitely angle dependent there. Ooh. Ooh. Now that's cool. Look at that. Look how cool that is. Let's RAM preview that. I mean, ideally, like I said earlier, if we were really trying to be productive with our time here, we would cache this mesh before trying to work on our shading, but we're not really focused on time. We're just playing. I think we're probably going to stream for maybe, what time is it, 1:35? I should probably get something done, maybe around 2. So, depends on how long you guys hang out for. Man, that's creating some like extreme hot spots under there. But it's kind of doing something cool along the rest of it. It feels like the thickness of this is really causing a lot of our issues. I feel like I wonder if I set this to double-sided, if it would create better results. Let's see what that looks like. I mean, that's really interesting. I have no earthly idea what that is, but it definitely is interesting. Let's test my theory. So let's go to the model, and we're going to take a snapshot. And let's go to double-sided. Yeah, so I think that if I move to the top now. Oh man, that is just a weird surface. I just don't know what it's doing. Let's try adding in one more light. Let's add in a normal point, and let's set that to blue. Excuse me, and 100. We don't need cast shadows. We're gonna move it to the center and then also down underneath it. We want something lighting from the bottom. And then let's go back to our, do we have an offset? Oh, we do have an offset that's currently set to -55. So what do we set this to positive? 15. That's cool. So that offset was definitely trying to connect everything instead of letting it be more broken apart. In my other setup, I was like, it's almost like it was acting like the sheeter effect inside of like RealFlow, where like if you have like tendrils that are moving like close together, then it tries to draw in between them. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to stop that. I was just trying to launch Photoshop so I could doodle. Seems cool though. What's funny is like this is that earlier test that I was looking at on that library shot. I actually really wanted to make something like this that felt like a surface. And I was struggling to do that. Oh, so here's my Photoshop. If I do, don't look at anything. If you see anything, don't look. So what I was trying to explain there was, let me switch this to black. Like what that offset does is like, say you have these like strokes that are far apart, like when it's meshing, it's doing this, right? It's like, okay, that's a mesh, and like that's a mesh. And then when you play with like that offset value, I feel like what it then tries to do is like, it's like, okay, this is a mesh, and also there's a mesh nearby, and then this is a mesh nearby. So then what you end up getting is like this negative space filled in. And I find like that's kind of the fun place to play, to find the balance between those two things. But what that causes though, by doing that, that ends up causing a lot of noise, right? Because then let's say if your surface is doing this, and then you get like some holes in there, you know, these holes I feel like are going to cause you, in your animation as it's trying to mesh and be adaptive, this is where it gets noisy. So this ends up like, you know, like just jittering a lot because it's trying to like draw those holes and keep them closed or together. So like in that first demo that I was showing earlier, like I was trying that offset value and I thought it was getting cool things to kind of create those like meshing the in-betweens, but it definitely was like noisy. Whereas like you can see with this, like it's not bad. It here, let me see. If I set this to, let's go up here and set our volume. Oh, well, I didn't have volume caching on, so cool. Can't do that. Here we can just I'll just show you what it looks like. So let's go to this offset. I'm sorry, that is our advect. And this is our offset. And this is our create. Boop, boop. Was I not typing that entire? Oh, it just keeps like going into my comp. I am not trying to do that. I am trying to rename these. Sorry. All right, so if we go into this offset, like I said, and we've just completely, what did I do now? What happened? Oh no. That's weird. I was just pressing like enter. I don't understand how that was like breaking things. Sorry, there we go. Offset, if we set this to negative, like I was talking about, so you can see that it starts drawing up those arms and it's connecting them. So if I go further, you can see it's going up and up, and then over here you can see it's bridging the gaps there until, you know, like you go all the way up and then it's just one big mess. And the opposite, you know, the opposite does whatever it wants. And then dilated road, if I go inwards, whoa, that is too much. So that's kind of cool. It's like doing the opposite, right? Where it's like trying to, instead of merge and bridge between those two particle gaps, it's just like, I see a particle here and I'm gonna like end it there. I think that's pretty good. I mean, that makes it pretty lo-fi. I think you would have to really compensate for this. Like I could drop my voxel size. But again, you know, I'm going to take a render hit for that. If we turn on our mesh, you can see how dense that's looking. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, that's probably like medium quality, right? It's not fine. I mean, we still have adaptive, so you can see these kind of bigger areas, surface areas where it's trying to just like reduce down and keep the detail towards the corners and where it's merging. But yeah, that's cool. Any other questions? Anything else you guys want to look at? I mean, this is it's all here for you. I'm just playing around. Who else is in the chat? Is there a way to see who's here? I can't really see who. Oh, participants. No, I just see me. Why can't I see? Why can't I see people? Or is it really just me? Is it just me here now? Did everybody go away? There you go. Yeah, I can't see. I don't understand. Oh, no worries. About to wrap this this scene up though. This scene is heavy and intense. Looks pretty cool. I don't know what I would be making to where I'm like, yeah, this is the approach I should go for. It's definitely concert visuals. You hook this up to like sound keys and you have the emitter settings set to one of the beats or something. It seems like that would be cool. I mean, you could probably just, well, I have it currently set to, oh, it is set to default. Yeah. I could put like a wiggle here. Wiggle maybe every 4 frames. 150. Oops, why did it put that extra parentheses? Oh, I think I upset it. Oh, did I set it too low? Yeah, I think I just crashed it because we had it setting to, it probably set its initial value to like 0. Yeah, made it mad. That apparently is like the default way to piss it off, is if you're doing meshing and advecting and there is 0 particles there, it is upset, very upset. That is the lesson learned. So that crashes it every time. It is definitely a good thing to know. Oh wait, did it come back? It's a trooper if it came back. Hurry, set it to something higher. Oh man, you're a trooper, After Effects. I'm sorry for doubting you. No, thanks Kyle for jumping in, man. I appreciate it. Definitely will try to maybe do this scheduled so that we can get more people involved instead of just trying to randomly do it in the middle of the day. But hey, I had free time, so I just wanted to take advantage of it. Look at that. It's kind of cool. Yeah, definitely the advect is really picky about not having particles to advect. It's like, piss off. But that's cool. I think that's kind of fun. Thanks for bringing that up so that we could play with that. I feel like if we had like a random rotation on the Y as well, like what if we're X, sorry. What if we set this to like 15 to 50? Wow. You can see where like it hit the cache where it's like, I've already cached all these frames up into this point and then I'm going to make new frames, and then it just like freaked out. I think the proper solve to that is to just turn off our caching. Just tell it don't look at that. Just ignore the cache for now, because we haven't cached what we wanted. So yeah, the random rotation in that definitely helps make that more dimensional. I think with the ring emitting outwards at a constant like 90 degrees there was creating a very flat look, where I think this is like, now that it's like rotating and moving around, I think we start getting some interesting like meshing. All right, Chris, see you later. Good luck in your meeting there. Oh man, my Dropbox just freaked out. I don't know what's going on over there. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's definitely very different looking. I mean, I guess the thing with the noise though that I don't understand is like you have multiple places to put this now, right? So you could put a noise to affect your particles. You could create a physics system, and then you could create a force that's a noise, flow noise. Or you could also, like, you know, have this advection, but they're all putting noises like on the same way. I would be curious to why you would choose advect over putting the noise somewhere else. I think in my mind, I would rather just put, I mean, I guess because, you know, the turbulence that you get from just the normal field, or not field, but node, doesn't do the flow noise. It just does a kind of basic noise. And then the force, the physics force, if you really didn't want to do physics, I guess, you know, that's calculation intensive. And then adding it here seems like another option, but to get that kind of flow curl effect. But I don't really know if it's worth it. I kind of would have to compare and contrast like the different visual styles that you're getting out of that, because I kind of would rather just do I mean, I am not saying that this isn't cool. I just want to know if I could get here without having to do that advect noise. I mean, at the end of the day, this is cool because it's like the noise is affecting the mesh, but the mesh would get affected the other ways too. I mean, that's just downright cool. I don't really know. Let's call our spotlight XX, and let's call our fill light Z. Let's create a volume and see what happens here. Volumetric, starting with XX. And then let's make sure to add on, let's go up here to the top and turn on shadows. And then what happens if our radius is turned up? That's pretty cool. Let's decrease our hotspot brightness and size. And let's turn our decay to 25. I think that'll make it go further. Oh, I'm sorry, that's shorter. The other way. Let's go 75. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it would be cool if they had a noise visualizer. I think they were adding that for the base ones, but I don't know if they added that for everything. But I know they've kind of been working on the helpers and what information is there. Like I noticed they have a helper for the nodes now for material. Like you can see which direction your material is like projecting if you're doing planar. Can I just snooze you, Dropbox? Like you're just annoying. Pause syncing. Let's do that. Sorry. Yeah. So they added in a node so that you can kind of see planar. If you're doing a planar projection, you can see if it's like in the X, Y, or YZ axis, which is really cool, but I don't think they've really added it in for everything. I mean, this thing is just bananas. It's getting a little noisy up here at the top. I wonder if that's like the render settings. I mean, it's set to high. kind of noticed that with the volumetric light in bigger scenes, when you start getting intense lights like that, that there is some noise involved. But I've definitely been able to dial in the settings to overcome it, though. It hasn't been that big of an issue. Yeah, that's cool. I think that's pretty much like the coolest thing we can make today, accidentally. I have absolutely no idea what that is. It reminds me of like back in the day, there was this RealFlow artist who used to do these like super weird organic abstract shapes. And that's what it reminds me of. I can't remember his name. I wonder if, do I have, I wonder where that would be if I had that reference. I'm just so unprepared today. My computer is just like upset. That is not where I thought I was going. I have a reference folder somewhere. There it is. Motion, patterns, typography, CG. That would be kind of fun to create something like that. I don't think that'd be too hard, actually. I mean, I think this like subsurface ripples would be a little tricky. It's like you almost had to have some like, I think if you twisted it, you could get some of that, but that's kind of cool. I think you could definitely make these shapes. I don't know about that inner detail, but you could make something like that. There it is. Man, I knew I had it. Spatial harmonics group. Yeah, he used to make these really crazy RealFlow sims that were basically look like they were fed into a repeater, which we could do with our simulation too, but there's something really interesting about these old things. Can't believe I had that and I knew where it was. That was amazing. Let's see if spatial harmonics group sims. Sorry, such a sidebar derailing of what's happening. I really just wanted to find some more of their images. Oh well, that's their website apparently. Yeah, that's it. I think that's a good place to wrap up because I don't know what else to explore. At least we got to look at a couple of things. Thanks for sitting in. I appreciate it. It was fun. I think it was cool just to kind of like do something live and then, you know, have you guys live feedback and talking about things and letting me fumble around. Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime. Yeah, cool. Have a good day. And this recording will probably live on the channel, I think. We'll see how that goes. All right, I'm out of here. Have a good one.